Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Ties 2.0, featured on the Whole Care Network and UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. I'm your host and presenter, Christopher McClellan. You just might know me as the Bowtie Guy. On this episode of Healing Ties 2.0, we feature Elissa Lewin, who is the founder and executive director at Nancy's House. Nancy's House is a program designed to break the isolation and exhaustion that can come from being a family caregiver. The program evolved from Elissa's own experience as a serial caregiver. Nancy's House is a unique program in the United States. It combines rest and nurturing self-care skills through support for caregivers in 1-day and 3-day retreats. I know you're going to enjoy my conversation with Elissa as much as I did, and you're going to receive valuable information and resources throughout the entire show. Let's join my conversation with Elissa, and we'll see you on the other side of the show. Well, greetings, Elissa, and welcome to this episode of Healing Ties 2.0. It's great to visit with you today.
Chris, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You know, I've had the pleasure of visiting with you quite a bit over the last month or so, and I've learned quite a bit about your terrific program, Nancy's House. And I know I'm going to call you Nancy throughout the program, so I just want to prepare the listeners that I'm going to get the names mixed up, but hopefully that's part of my charm. But maybe some people don't think that. But I have to kind of put you on the spot right at the beginning of the show, Nancy. I did it. I did it. See,
well, now we got that out of the way. So 3 strikes, then I'm out. But Elissa, as I do with all of my guests, how are you creating healing ties? Chris, I think there are a lot of answers to that. I create those ties at every level of how I live. Professionally, I'm a psychologist and a marriage and family therapist, and hopefully create those healing ties with all of my clients.
Yes.
Personally, just as a serial caregiver, and working with various family members and supporting friends, I think that it's an important element of just how we live our lives is that we support each other. And then, of course, the reason that you invited me here is Nancy's House. And Nancy's House is a program that provides support and education for family caregivers. We break the isolation and exhaustion that can come with taking care of somebody else who is chronically ill or disabled.
And I'm privileged enough to know the story behind the name of Nancy's House, but I'd like you to share it with our listeners here on Healing Ties and especially in the UK.
Nancy's House actually grew out of my own experience as a caregiver. As a younger woman, when I had a toddler still in diapers and a child in 2nd grade, I became aware that my 2nd grader had some pretty serious learning differences and became very involved in his schooling and education. By involved, I mean daily working with him on all of his work and talking with teachers and meeting with school psychologists, the whole package. In the midst of all of this, my mother-in-law became very ill, and we very quickly had to get her diagnosed, figure out appropriate services, get her placed, and then, clean out her apartment, because apartment buildings don't care what's going on in your family. They want to rent that space.
Right.
So in the midst of all of that, I noticed this swollen gland in my neck. And being a very good caregiver, I would have ignored it, except it got in the way when I turned my head to back up the car. So I went to the doc, expecting to get antibiotics and be sent on my way. And the doctor said, "I don't see any signs of infection. I'd like to do your blood work." Okay, fine. And she called me the next morning, which is never a good sign.
Never a good sign when the doctor's calling.
And she said, "Listen, Either the lab's really screwed up or we have a problem and I want to do your blood work again. Okay. So I trotted over to her office and she called me the next morning and said, okay, we have a problem. And that problem turned out to be that I had developed chronic lymphocytic leukemia. What is really interesting about that diagnosis, now at the time I was 42, maybe 40. What's really interesting about that diagnosis is it tends to hit the elderly most commonly. Mm-hmm. It tends to hit men more than women. And there are some suggestions that it affects African Americans at a higher rate than Caucasians. I know that your speakers can't see me, but I am white. So your listeners can't see me. So there are 3 categories that I don't hit. So what's going on here? Well, what I have figured out in the interim is that what's going on here is it's an immune system cancer. And when you are under stress, being a caregiver, your immune system is suppressed for a very long time. And that leaves you vulnerable to all kinds of things happening.
Goodness.
So, yes.
Our immune system is caregiving impacts our entire.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll come back to that one in a minute. Mm-hmm. The rest of the story is after we got that taken care of, and in fact, shortly after my mother-in-law died, my in-laws divorced when my husband was a year old, so never the twain shall meet. My father-in-law came to live with us because at that point he was 90. He had Parkinson's disease. He had congestive heart failure. He had diabetes. He had a couple of cancers going, and he had just enough dementia to keep life interesting. So that was when my full-time caregiving really kicked in because we had to take care of him here. It was no longer safe to try to maintain him in his own space. My daughter was then 8. This is the one who had been a toddler when my mother-in-law became ill. My son was now 13. And I knew, having had this cancer experience, that I had to take care of myself as a caregiver. So I started seeing a massage therapist named Nancy Brown. Nancy had a son with autism. Mm-hmm. We had this conversation one day about wouldn't it be great if there were a place we could go to get taken care of the way we take care of these other people. And I really feel like she was there to just kind of plant that seed, because within about a month of that conversation, she left the practice and nobody knew where she went. My father-in-law lived for another 4.5 years.
Wow.
He died on a Tuesday. Wednesday morning, I woke up and realized I had just had my first solid night's sleep in 5 years.
Oh, goodness.
And I thought, oh my God, if this is happening to me, and I'm ahead of the curve on, you need to take care of yourself as a caregiver, what is happening to everybody else? So I went to the literature. I'm a good psychologist. I know how to do my research, right? And I went to see who's doing what and what they're saying. And the truth is, we have known since the early 90s, we have known the impacts of caregiving. And every single article was saying, caregivers have to take care of themselves. And I thought, that's brilliant, Sherlock. I would never have thought about that. Right?
I could have had a V8.
Right. But what nobody was saying was, and here's how, and more importantly, I'm going to help you to do it.
Right.
So it was from that work of the realization of the need, recognizing that it's not available out in our community in general, and recognizing how much we actually knew about the harm that being a caregiver can do, that all led to the development of Nancy's house as a space designed specifically for the emotional, physical, and financial exhaustion of caregiving.
Caregiving is emotional.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. As you will know, caregiving, and there is always the feeling of gratification. I am not taking that away from the caregiving work that we do, right? We do it because we want to feel useful. We want to feel helpful. We want to help this person that we love. And it still takes a toll. It still takes a toll.
When we talk about caregiving and we talk about the things that impact us, and then when we realize, and you said it so beautifully earlier, if this is happening to me, who else is this happening to? And then we find that common bond when we reach out to other folks who are in the same experience. And there's some relief in that.
There is. We have a recent guest, and it took her a little bit of time and a lot of tears to finally be able to say, taking care of her husband is a burden. And with that statement, she took a breath, and it was like, oh my, what a relief to actually be able to say that. Another person I was talking to.
Cathartic.
It is. Yeah. It is. And when we're trying so hard to keep that inside, to not let that come into our awareness, to say, oh, no, it can't be a burden. I'm taking care of this, person I love, this person I made a vow before friends, family, and God, but it's true. It can be a burden. It can be a burden. So there are two elements to that in terms of Nancy's house. One is creating the safe space to be able to say, yeah. And the safe space in the presence of others who really get it, right? Yeah, it can be a burden. And that doesn't mean you're bad or evil or inadequate or any of those things we like to pin on ourselves. It just means you're human. And this is hard. And probably one of the hardest things you'll ever do.
And I always like to add with that, not only is it one of the hardest things that you'll ever do, it's also can be, and often is, one of the most gratifying things that you can ever do. It's that dichotomy that is so hard to balance.
Exactly.
Because, and that's why we, at least for me, that's why I like to do these podcasts and stories and meet with awesome people like yourself who have done this and see it from both perspectives.
Mm-hmm. It is both. It is both. And to be able to hold both of those simultaneously. People seem to feel they have to choose one or the other, like it's either, I am good and this is fulfilling and this is wonderful, or, somehow it's bad to acknowledge these other harder feelings. And the truth is that we can hold both of those experiences as true and real. It can be meaningful and important, and I would never choose any other way of doing this. And at the same time, be really, really difficult and trying and exhausting. And to be able to acknowledge that these are both true at the same time is really important.
One of the analogies that I like to use is that being on a roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And there was I spent a lot of time, and still do, in New Orleans as I was a kid. And there was just a wonderful roller coaster called the Zephyr. It was one of those old wooden roller coasters. Mm-hmm. And they just don't make those wooden roller coasters like they did back in the 60s and so. But the roller coaster was up and down, hills, back and forth. You had the exhilaration, and then you had the scary going down, and but in the end, it all came back and leveled out. And I think that's, as I look back on my caregiving experience, and I know my listeners have heard me say this many times, and I'm not sure if I've said this to you, but there is a leveling out, and it really is something that we do internally at our own pace and at our own time, and especially after it ends.
That after it ends time, yeah, and I like that. I like that analogy of the roller coaster, because it's not only the ups and downs, but there's an emotional intensity, right? There's that feel of both going up and going down, and I think that also speaks to our caregiving experience, that intensity of what happens. And it can be hard to level out. I don't know so I got to tell you, I don't do roller coasters. I am not a roller coaster person, but I do like boats. And, yeah. And I assume this happens with roller coasters, but that feeling of when you step off, the ground under your feet feels different, and it takes a little while to stabilize again. Mm-hmm. That I think that's part of that evening out also, that it can, even after the ride is done, it can take a little while to get your land legs back under you, and to give yourself the grace to go through that period, I think is so important.
Oh, do we connect on so many levels here? on the peaks and the valleys, and that calmness, because how do I want to say this? There's so many folks that we get to meet along the way, and I'm sure this is been your experience at Nancy's house, where you don't really, somebody comes in, you don't really know them, but you talk to them, and all of a sudden it's like, I've been friends with this person for a long time, because those common experiences really have a way of connecting people.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's what we rely on at Nancy's house, is building that connection. We always run in very small groups. During COVID, it's been capped at 5, but in the before times, it would be capping it at 8 or 10, because we want people to really get to know each other and really become that community of support, and really become that person that you can turn to when you need someone who knows your story and you don't have to explain it all over again. And just to have that safe space of somebody being able to say, yeah, I get it. I get it.
I get it. And you're walking that path together, even though it's a different journey. Yeah. We all kind of end up on that same road. And early on in our conversation, you said really one of the big key words that happens to every caregiver at some point is isolation.
It does. It does, especially as our responsibilities in caregiving get more intense. I've heard people say taking care of an aging parent is like having another child. And I have to tell you, I disagree with that. Because if you're taking care of a child, a healthy child, you expect, with everything that you put into it, that child's going to grow, and they're going to thrive, and they're going to hit their milestones, and they're going to become more and more independent. When you're taking care of a parent, that's none of that true. You are going to become more and more involved and responsible, and it's going to become more and more of a challenge. So I think that it's important to recognize when you're caring for somebody, it doesn't always get better, and it very often gets worse. And how do you build your supports to be able to carry you through that?
That's a point very well made, Elissa, because we often get into the mindset that they've always gotten better. So it's just a couple of more days, and things are going to improve, and before you know it, they'll be just like they were, and we lose sight of the fact that there's a plateau, and then in another 2 or 3 months, there's another plateau.
That's
Whatever
first.
Right.
Right.
And we're so involved, and this happened to me. It's like I never recognized how sick Richard really was, especially the last six months of his life, because I was there every day. I didn't see the subtle changes.
Right. Right.
And that's why having the ability to come to a community like Nancy's house is so important, because you can share these stories with people that are going to get it.
Right. Right. I mean, each disease, each diagnosis brings its own challenges, of course.
Mm-hmm.
One of the stories that comes to mind as you're saying that is a guest we had who took care of her husband who had ALS. And he wanted, a conversation that all ALS patients and families have is, when the time comes that you can't breathe on your own, do you want to have a trach put in? And this man said, yes, he did. And his wife came to our retreat. This one was sponsored by the ALS Association. They have been amazing in supporting their caregivers. And this poor young woman who was in her 30s, had young children, burst into tears. And she said, if he gets trached, he can live a very long time, and it will take all the money that we have saved for our kids' college education. Now, how do you make that choice? How do you make that, how do you say, I don't want him to do this, which is in essence a death sentence, mm-hmm. and weigh that against your kid's future? You can't say that out in public. People think you're a horrible human being. But in this group, it was like, yeah, we get it. Of course, that's a hard feeling to face and a hard choice to face. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. So the big piece of creating community, breaking the isolation.
Right.
Right. Creating healing ties.
It is creating healing ties. Thank you for that. It's so essential, and I know, at least for me, I didn't figure it out until way past the way into the caregiving experience, and I think that's why we kind of stay in it, because we want to be able to help people that are going to come after us, because people are going to need caregivers.
Yes, people are going to need caregivers, and with the changes in our healthcare system and with the changes in our population, we're going to need more caregivers, and we're going to have fewer of them. So it really becomes all the more critical that we support those caregivers that we have, that we don't have them dying before the person that they're taking care of, that we don't have, which, by the way, does happen. And, that we don't have our caregivers getting sick and needing care themselves, which also happens. There was a study that came out recently. I don't know if you saw it. It was done by AARP and the National Alliance for Caregiving. And they did the statistics for caregiving in 2020. Have you seen this one, Chris?
I have seen it, yes.
It's frightening. I mean, what it says is, over the past 5 years, because it compares 2015 to 2020, over the past 5 years, everything has gotten worse. Caregivers' health has gotten worse. Difficulty in coordinating care has gotten worse. I mean, the number of caregivers has increased. It's just getting harder. It's just getting harder. And we have to support our caregivers. They are the backbone of our health care. And
I know my listeners have heard me say this numerous times, but just think if every caregiver went on strike for one day and took their care, I'll use the generic term care partner, mm-hmm. to an emergency room, an adult daycare center, urgent care, wherever, the healthcare system, not only in the United States, but really across the globe, would would collapse because the caregivers are the backbone of any healthcare system.
Right. Yeah. And we have to, the analogy that I use is like our own backbone, right? When everything is going along fine and dandy, we don't pay attention to it.
It's only when you're in the middle of a crisis that you say, oh, wait a minute, I think I might need to do something. And what happens when you're in a crisis?
That's when you make
poor emotional decisions. Yeah.
Oh, work.
I'm the poster child. For doing that, especially after caregiving. but goodness.
Yeah.
And I guess it also goes to say that, kind of repeating myself here, but this is not just a local issue, it's a global issue.
Yes. Yes. Some places do a better job than others. And yet, even so, a very dear friend of ours in London just died last week. And his wife was his carer, as they call them.
The carers, yes.
And even with an amazing national health system, and he got amazing service and really good care, but even with that, most of it was dumped on her. And when they had reached the point where treatment was no longer an option, they said, well, he'll come back home, and you'll take care of him at home. And she was like, I can't do that. And fortunately, their system allowed her to find other options. But no matter where you look, caregivers are the ones. And part of the problem with that, I think, Chris, is that for a lot of caregivers, they don't identify as that, or carers, or a care partner. They don't identify. It's just like, I'm a spouse, or I'm a
spouse. This is what I'm supposed to do.
Exactly. Or I'm an adult child. Of course, I'm going to take care of my parent. And there is very little thought given to, what does this really mean? What do you need in order to be able to do this?
Okay, so I have to ask you my pet question that I ask everybody, even though I know the answer, because you've set me up here 100%. Elissa, have you met anybody that's had caregiving on their bucket list of things to do in
life? Sure, Chris. Why not?
You're the first person that's answered yes.
And as she says sarcastically.
Exactly.
Right? Really, who
right.
plans for this, right?
Who plans for this? Who plans for an emergency?
Right.
And caregiving can happen very slowly and subtly.
Yeah.
And you coined it perfectly. I'm their spouse. Of course, I'm going to help them do what needs to be done. But then things change.
Right.
The disease progresses, and all of a sudden, this role expands. And before you know it, and I use this lightly, it's out of control.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're doing your normal activities, and if you're full-time working and then caregiving is on top of that,
and
all
kids?
of a sudden, and you have kids, you're in the sandwich generation. Mm-hmm. Those 24 hours in a day, they kind of get minimalized, and all of a sudden, what are these 36-hour days all about? Because it does it happens subtly,
right?
And it not only it all happens subtly, it can happen immediately because of an untimely diagnosis or an unfortunate accident, and you're suddenly
in a heartbeat.
You're thrust into this in a heartbeat, and
right.
And it comes back to why it's so important to be able to talk to people like yourself who are providing outlets
thank you.
for caregivers. And I look back just 10 or 11 years for me, there was some resources out on the internet, but nothing like there is today. And to be able to share this is just vitally important.
So can I say something about that?
Sure.
So one of the things that I have noticed, because it's been 15 years now since Nancy's House was incorporated, In that time, what I have seen and heard is there is more and more awareness of caregiving. AARP has done a splendid job of marketing. Problem is they market to a particular kind of caregiver, but that's another story. What I have noticed is that there has been an increase in the number of websites that are available. And don't get me wrong, I think that is fabulous. I think the more resources that caregivers have, the better. The problem with a website is it means at the end of a long day when I'm exhausted and it's 1:00 in the morning and I finally got my loved one settled down and I have 3 minutes to myself, I am now going online to look up information, find some. It's not helping me, the caregiver, at that core level. And, when I hear people say, oh, we're having a virtual respite retreat online or retreat online, it's like, no, I'm sorry. You may be providing a great service online. And by the way, we do have a conference coming up that's going to be online. So I've got nothing against that part of it. But it is not a retreat. It is not taking you out of your caregiving role and giving you a rest. Right? It might be great information, and it is, but let's be sure we know what it is. Because we, as an organization, are so unique in what we do. And I think that that's an important element, that we bring you out of your caregiving role, put you in a small group. So you've got rest. It's 2 nights of sleep. 2 nights of sleep. So one of our board members specializes in sleep and the effects of sleep, or just lack of it. And he has done, the past couple of years, he has done one of the most popular workshop at our conferences. And he is doing it again. It's Dr. Maurice Baynard. And he and I were having this conversation one day. And I said, so look, I've got caregivers who are sleep deprived because you have to change linens or toilet someone or respond to a breathing alarm or, like any of a bazillion things. And I said, so they have disturbed sleep. How much sleep do they really need to be able to reset and recover? And he said, the answer really is 4 consecutive nights. You need 4 consecutive nights of undisturbed sleep.
Oh, goodness. That would be like a week or longer for some of us in the trenches.
That's right. So Nancy's house, at this point, because we don't have our own facility, and so, I rent B&B space, I can't give people those 4 nights, but I can give them 2. And that 2 nights of sleep and that day in the middle, just as important as the 2 nights of sleep is that day in the middle where you don't have to think about anybody. You don't have to go anywhere. Right? That day is magical. Seeing people transform is, I run out of words. I mean, people think I'm being, theatric or whatever, but the truth is it is.
It is the truth, because it's the epitome of the importance of self-care.
Right.
And that is one of the main components that we don't learn in the middle of this, is the importance of self-care. And that is really, there's 2 very important roles every caregiver plays: advocacy and self-care. And we don't get the self-care right away. We don't think it's important.
That's true. Oh, for caregivers, they fall to the bottom of their to-do list, right? I have to do the laundry. I have to do the shopping. I have to prepare the special foods. I have to do the nutritional stuff. I have to clean the equipment. I have to. And somehow I'm not on that list. It was really...
Yeah, where are my needs?
So
that's my
one
needs.
Of the most profound statements a guest made. She was a mom. She takes care of her daughter who has MS. And her daughter was a teenager. So this is a young mom. And she came in that usual go, go, go caregiver mode and taking care of everybody else. And in fact, she was reluctant to come to our retreat. And friends of hers stepped in and said, we're going to take care of your daughter. You need to go. So God bless those friends. But what she came to at the end of our retreat was, any medical equipment my daughter needs, I'm going to do everything I can to get it. And I'm going to do everything I can to maintain it because she needs it. And she took a beat and then she said, and what I've realized is I am her most important piece of medical equipment and I have to take care of me.
That is, wow. That is very meaningful to be able to say that and feel it and do it.
Yep.
What a gift that is to share that experience with others so that they can find their path and to be able to say that.
To recognize and this cuts both ways, right, Chris? Because there is that you have to take care of you to be your best self to take care of this other person. But the other side of that is you have to take care of you because you deserve it. Period. End of sentence.
Yeah, and the other part of that, which is often left unsaid, is your care partner needs you to take care of yourself also because you're their lifeline.
Right.
And the person who told me to take care of myself, who was concerned about me, was the person I was caring for because he could see what it was doing.
You were very fortunate.
And
not all care recipients or care partners are so kind and generous.
He was in tune. He was in tune to my health, and he was concerned about that from up until the day he died. That's going to get emotional here, but so that's probably a really good time for us to take our break. I don't want to be a sobbing show host presenter, but it's happened before. But let's take our break here, Elissa, and when we come back, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to want to know one fun fact about you that you haven't shared yet today, and I know all of our listeners are on the edge of their seats wanting to know.
So
Okay, you're listening to Healing Ties, featured on the Whole Care Network and ukhealthradio.com, the world's #1 talk health radio. Hey, it's Christopher McClellan, and you know me as the Bowtie Guy. On Healing Ties 2.0, we visit with people from all over the globe who share their stories because it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And if you would like to share your story on Healing Ties, email me direct at thebowtieguy@healingties.com. We would love to share your story to your health, happiness, and prosperity. Coming up next week on Healing Ties 2.0.
Hello, I'm Susie Singer Carter, and I'm excited for you to listen to our episode with Chris on Healing Ties, talking about my film, My Mom and the Girl, and my journey with my mother with Alzheimer's and how my life is so much better now, and how you can also embrace this kind of journey with love and honor and beautiful silver linings.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We are continuing our delightful and meaningful conversation with Elissa Lewin from Nancy's House. You see, I didn't mess up the names on the return.
I'm proud of you, Chris.
The first half of the program was just delightful. And even though I'm a little prejudiced, I thought the conversation just flowed wonderfully, and I'm sure all our listeners are enjoying this as well. But now it's time to put you on the spot. We want to know one fun fact about you. So the microphone is yours.
Well, I think that it's really important to find something to laugh at. And so the fun fact about me is I have loved silly socks since way before they were cool.
Oh, very
And right
good.
now today I am wearing sock monkey socks, which I think is a very meta kind of thing. They are socks that have little images of sock monkeys all over them. So
I love those types of socks. I have some that have bow ties on them. So
for the bow tie guy.
yeah. So how did this come about? What
Oh
was
my
the,
gosh, it has been so long, I don't even remember. I think it just started because whenever I saw my first pair, it was like, I need to have funny feet. Everything else is just so hard. I need to have funny feet. And so that's what I have done for years and years and years. It's a way of just bringing a little light, a little balance, a little humor into whatever the day has to bring.
I have an idea. And of course, you have to invite me, though. But if make it up to your neck of the woods, which I hope I can. Yes. We could do a presentation today and wear some fancy socks.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun?
And we could talk to the caregivers about having something of their own that they can point to, having a fun fact that they can create that is all theirs, that they can take their mind. We'll just pull up our pants leg and show them our fancy socks. And I could bring my 100 bow ties too. So no, that's a whole other
What's
subject.
really funny is, when we're doing like a yoga class at our retreats, I'll kick off my shoes and take part. And I always get comments on my socks. So it not only makes me laugh, it makes other people laugh.
To tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing at Nancy's house, the programs, and I know you have a conference coming up.
We do.
November.
I am so excited about the conference. It is Saturday, November 6th. Registration will be opening in a little bit. It's not quite open yet, but if people want to go to our website and click the subscribe button so that you get our newsletters, you'll be kept in the loop about when programs are coming up. The conference, Saturday, November 6th, is going to be virtual this year. Because of COVID, we want to make sure everything is safe. And it's going to be from 9 a.m. until 12:30 with, breaks so that people are not just sitting all day. It's from 9 to 12:30. There are going to be 6 really wonderful workshops, and people will be able to choose 2 of the 6 to attend. And what I am really psyched about is our keynote speaker is Kate Washington, who wrote Already Toast, Caregiving and Burnout in America. And she is just delightful, compelling, honest. This book is brutally honest. It is the most brutally honest caregiving book, memoir that I think I have ever read.
I'm hoping to reach out to her. I don't know her, but I'd love to have her on as a
she
guest.
is wonderful to speak with. And because she is a journalist and a researcher, she can tell you all of the things that are good. So it's not just her story, but how her story integrates into what's happening culturally, right? What are the supports that we need to put in place as a society to support our caregivers, and why this is so critically important. So I am thrilled to have her as our keynote speaker. And then the workshops are going to be, again, Maurice Baynard's doing his sleep workshop, and Kathy Sikorsky is an elder law attorney who is also on our board, and she has also jam-packed workshops in all of the conferences that we have. We're having a stress management specialist. We are having a Qigong instructor who is doing the 6 healing sounds of Qigong. So all of these are going to be interactive. It's going to be live on Zoom. What else I'm missing? Ask the expert. So help in negotiating the special needs field and what are the resources that are available.
Yes.
That's Eric Jorgensen. And, Kay Coughlin, who is, Facilitator on Fire, who is a caregiver coach, is going to be doing a workshop. So I am really excited about the quality of our presenters, about the material they are presenting, and it's going to be a fabulous morning. And I hope everybody comes and takes part in it. Registration is $10
And,
and scholarships available because that's hard for a lot of caregivers.
Sure. And give me the date again.
Saturday,
date
November
time.
6th from 9 to 12:30.
And that's for our listeners in the UK and beyond, that 9 to 12:30, that's Eastern time. I'm not really good at transforming the time, but I think that would be
British.
2 to 5:30 in Britain, and right, yeah. So
Greenwich.
and this is, it's a universal conference. Anybody can sign up.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
And what was that email? What was that address again that people can sign up?
So to subscribe, go to our website, which is www.nancys, NANCYS house.org, and make sure it's a dash and not an underscore. It's a hyphen. All right. So it's www.nancys-house.org. O-R-G.
Elissa, with the great work you're doing at Nancy's House, you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties. I can't thank you enough for joining me today, and I look forward to our next conversation, which I know will happen real soon.
Chris, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. I can't believe our time is already up.
I think it's safe to say all caregivers are welcomed at Nancy's House, and be sure to visit Nancy's House online at Nancy, NANCYS -house, HOUSE.org. That's Nancy's-house.org to learn more about all their wonderful programs that support caregivers. And be sure to register for their virtual conference coming up in November. Well, thanks for joining us today for this episode of Healing Ties. As you know, I'm your host and presenter, Christopher McClellan. You just might know me as the Bowtie Guy. I've created a life to love after caregiving ends by being with awesome people like you. Please be sure to subscribe to Healing Ties wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties real soon. Take care. Bye for now.